intellectual power, using ideology purely as a vehicle. And there's very interesting insight into communism there. At the end, Mao lived like a potentate. He lived like an ancient Persian or Egyptian emperor. He was surrounded by women. He was surrounded by bastard children that he created. The Politburo used to meet around his bed. Mao, he was quite a beast towards the end, and used to say, I pardon for all women here, but he used to say to Western correspondents, he cleaned himself in his women. This is the great champion of humanity, the great anti-sexist, you see. This is what they're like when they're in power. Surrounded by Marxist books. Have you ever seen pictures of his bedroom? This enormous bed, like that of an emperor, with all these women and children around, and the secret police in their caps with the red star further back. And then these volumes of Marxist prose behind the red books, his own work allegedly, to the front. And then he'd be lying on this bed, dictating to the others like a sort of overgrown child, like an ideological version of a mad Roman emperor, essentially, because that's how it ended up. And probably the ideology had sort of ceased to matter by then, hadn't it? It became a sort of mental chess that you play with yourself and with others for reasons of pure power. Because these economies weren't making anything except more weapons. And the idea of Marxist critique of capitalism, that the proletariat is degraded because of the distinction between price and value, and that the surplus product is ripped out of the proletariat and invested by capitalists abroad in empire. When Lenin wrote Imperialism in 1916, this is why he explained the revolution hadn't happened yet. It hasn't happened yet because they've displaced the capital they've stolen from the people, stolen from the proletariat. And the irony was that extreme communism was an extreme version of what Marxism had criticised Western societies for. Total degradation of the peasantry and proletariat, total ripping out of surplus value, used to create more and more weapons in order to build more and more forms of power, pure power, as an end in itself, but always at a material level, because the ideology could only justify itself in material terms. I think, to close, the interesting thing about 1984 is that what lingers in my mind is the sense data. When Winston's in the Ministry of Truth and he needs to use the intercom, he has to clean the holes in the device because they're full of dirt, you know? It's that grubby, dirt under the fingernails element that you get in state socialism, even in Western societies. Anyone who's ever queued in the DHSS queue, the glass in the office is cracked. There are no plants. There's no carpet. Everything's unnaturally cold and grubby. You know, your substandard NHS ward, you know what I mean? Everything's slightly out of focus. No one listens to you when you do, well, half of them are foreign anyway, no one really listens to you when you say something to them. You exist, they exist for you, don't they? Not the other way round. There's a sort of, this logic, the state socialist logic, the logic of the producer, writ large. You couldn't buy anything in shops in the Soviet Union at the end, but the party could. You had a card and you went to a special shop where you could get razor blades and you could get boots, you could get just the niceties, soap, the things you need to live, basically, you know, in any sort of an industrial society. And the masses would queue. Anthony Burgess, who wrote Clockwork Orange, once went to a restaurant in Moscow and you sat there for 5 hours. There's a bit of service now, and screw you, we're the staff. You'll wait there for 5 hours, and then after 5 1/4 hours you get this sort of cabbage soup, which is just a bit of cabbage in a bit of hot water with a sprig of pasta in it. It's sort of chucked at you, you know. It's like in Western restaurants now, isn't it? But it's that sort of idea of the grubbiness of its texture, when you've got this ideology of idealism and universal brotherhood, and yet you return to the cabbage soup and the smell in a dysfunctional lift and the hair floating in your soup. And you know that state socialism of that sort, imposed by a party bureaucracy and army, has gone. And in all probability, won't come back. And yet the real point of 1984, and the reason why this novel lives, and still probably frightens people in a way, is the ubiquity of its concern with mental processes. And the belief that when humans, in many ways, reject the philosophers of the past, they will try and subordinate the present to them. Communism has died, maybe killed 100 million in the 20th century, or more. And it had to be fought. tendency of which we're in some ways a part, is accused by many out there of beastliness and of non-humanism and all the rest of it. But I would say that there was a time when the forces of the right had to be as ferocious, had to be almost as nasty as what they were attacking and was attacking them. Otherwise they would have been completely destroyed by it. This was an ideology that preached utopia but believed that the ends justified the means in a manner that's beyond that of a mafia don. Do you remember the scene in Mario Puzo's The Godfather, where the Jewish Hollywood producer who's a paedophile and the Irish-German consigliere, the counsellor of the mafia clan, and they talk about him, and he's racially abusive to people of Italian and Germanic and Irish ancestry and all the rest of it, and the Don waves that away, he's not bothered with all that. And Brando, a bit thinner then, a bit of a better actor then, said, he said, what does this man love? And he loves a horse. So the mob cuts off the head of the horse and puts it in his bed. Why? Because the Don is saying, I am a man beyond all law, beyond all morality, beyond anything you could even think of. I can strike at you in a way you don't even understand, because I have no limits. No limits. And there was a time when communism, before it froze into a bureaucracy, had no limits at all. I'll close with Lenin's remark. Don't forget the Cheka, the secret police, was created momentarily. It was said it would be dissolved in a few years, like the terror under Robespierre. It's just to impose discipline upon the class enemies so paradise can begin. Towards his death in 1924, Lenin's brain was liquefied. Many medical historians believe that at least half of it was liquid. And at the height of the terror and the war between the red and the whites, which of course the whites lost, Lenin said to one of his aides, now is the time. There's maximum chaos, total starvation, the complete collapse of the Russian economy, and civil war. Now is the time. And the aide said, time for what? And he said, time to seize all the assets of the Orthodox Church. Time to seize all their churches. Time to turn them into granaries and barns and shops and places where we put tank parks and tractors. And the aide said, why? And Lenin said, why not? Why not? We are history. We do what we wish. But he believed that in the moment of chaos, you extirpate the meaning of the prior order that the chaos is destroying, because they always worked on the mind before they worked on the body. Thank you very much.
An important book on this thing in the 1950s, The Goblet Fables.
Yes.
You read it?
Yes, a long time ago.
Yeah.
Yes,
As Orwell was a product of this society, could it be interpreted that his 1984 is an interpretation of his class act looking at the side and his dictatorship? This is not a democracy, and with the state of the 21st century, we are sending God save royalty where it is.
Satire on Labour's rule in 48.